Mario Kart is definitely Nintendo's biggest multiplayer series, as for every single Nintendo generation out there, there has been at least one new Mario Kart game with it. And every time you ask someone on what is their favorite Mario Kart game, then you're probably going to be getting multiple answers depending on who you asked. And for what Mario Kart game they're most nostalgic for, that's mostly going to be depending on which Nintendo console they grew up with. And for me personally, since I was a Nintendo Wii and DS kid back in the day, my Mario Kart experience was with Mario Kart DS and Mario Kart Wii. But based on the title of this video, we're going to be focusing specifically on Mario Kart Wii. As even though that DS was my first ever Mario Kart game, Mario Kart Wii was still a game that I played a lot over the years. I still remember the commercial to this very day, and the first time I actually played it was actually at my cousin's house. And my first impressions were, this is basically my Mario Kart game on DS, but on a big TV. And then one Christmas later, I was finally able to get the game for myself, including this very nifty Wii wheel that Nintendo was really promoting hard with this game. Which honestly isn't really that surprising. I mean, the Nintendo Wii was a very popular console when it comes to motion control multiplayer games, and having that with a Mario Kart game, yeah, they definitely had a big system seller in their hands. As this was the best-selling Mario Kart game of all time, right before Mario Kart 8 Deluxe basically took over everybody's house. But despite that, and long after the Nintendo Wii left the market, people still talked about this game to this very day. Especially on YouTube, as this game has an insane modding community. Which honestly really helped the longevity of this game in the long run, but for this video, I'm just going to be focusing specifically on the full Mario Kart Wii experience, which includes all the big content that this game has. And most importantly, this is just a dumb enough excuse for me just to talk about and play through Mario Kart Wii multiple times. But with everything out of the way, let's get started.
Mario Kart Wii! Woohoo!
Okay, so when you start the game, you're greeted to this cool opening cutscene where Mario and Luigi Peach are driving, or should I say floating, around with these Wii wheels. Which was always the weirdest part of this game's promotional stuff, where it's just Mario and Luigi floating around pretending they're in carts. It's mostly just to represent stuff like the Wii wheel, where it's just like, oh, you're steering the wheel like you're in the actual game and stuff. I do find it funny though, in this opening cutscene you see Luigi get obliterated twice. Like when Peach launches Luigi far off in the distance. And later on when they were showing a lot of gameplay, you just see Luigi get blown up with a freaking blue shell. Even in Mario Kart, he can't catch a break, but don't worry Luigi, you'll get your revenge soon enough. But anyway, so beginning of the game, you're greeted to the usual Mario Kart stuff, like your usual races, your battle modes, your time trials, and so on. But for now, we're just going to be starting a traditional Mario Kart experience, and with that, we are greeted to the character roster. And man, out of all the Mario Kart rosters out there, this was definitely a really good one at the time. Like, you have your usual mainstays that have appeared in basically every single Mario Kart game, but also you gave in some of the cool ones like Dry Bones, King Boo, and Birdo. Even Rosalina makes her Mario Kart debut in this game, which I know these days doesn't really sound that crazy. I mean, she's literally appeared in literally every single Mario multiplayer spinoff. But keep in mind, back in the day when it was... Super Mario Galaxy wasn't even a year old when Mario Kart Wii released. So seeing this freshly new Mario character show up in a Mario Kart game was pretty cool to see. Plus, if you had save data for Super Mario Galaxy, you can actually unlock Rosalina pretty easily. This game even has a pretty good amount of Donkey Kong representation, as you have DK and Diddy Kong as usual. But then surprisingly, they also included Funky Kong making his Mario Kart debut in this game. Which to this day is such a very cool and interesting inclusion, to the point where Funky Kong basically became the mascot for Mario Kart Wii. As he is definitely the most popular character in this roster, both meme-wise and the meta. But for the first round, I just decided to just go with my usual main, Yoshi. Alrighty, so for the gameplay. If you're familiar with Mario Kart's gameplay, which I'm pretty sure that 95% of the people watching this are, then you basically got the gist of it. I feel like at this point when DS released, Nintendo basically perfected the gameplay of Mario Kart. And so after DS, it's not basically how much they can refine Mario Kart, it's more so how much they can build upon it. As they slowly kept adding new features, like in 7 they included stuff like gliding underwater, and then with World they had like the open world and rail grinding. But as for Mario Kart Wii, this game does include a few substantial elements to the series. For one, every Mario Kart game before this game had about 8 racers on the field, but now with this one, they raised it up to 12, meaning that the racing can be a lot more chaotic than usual. Secondly, when you shake the Wii remote while being launched in the air, you can do something called a trick, which allows the player to do a cool little animation, and once you land, you get a small boost. Honestly, a very welcome inclusion, because not only is it very satisfying just to do simple tricks in the air, it also adds a bit more strategy to the race. And then finally, this game also introduces rideable bikes to the Mario Kart series. So now you have an option to choose to ride either karts or bikes, with them having both pros. Like the karts being able to do 2 mini turbo boosts, while the bikes can only do 1. But don't worry, because the bikes makes up for that by being better than the karts in every single way. As even though there's multiple options to choose from, it was very clear that they really wanted you to ride bikes in this game. As not only bikes have way better steering controls, but also, they have this ability where every time you're on a straightaway, you can do a thing called wheelie, which allows you to go a bit faster. Which really gives the karts a huge disadvantage in this game. Especially if you're going through the game in 150cc, where the game was basically like, I'm gonna kick your f***ing ass! Now granted, I'm fairly a bit rusty with Mario Kart Wii, as it's been a while since I've actually played this game, but even still, I honestly had a hard time actually going through the freaking first cup of this game. You know how everyone keeps saying how Mario Kart Wii has some crazy item balancing? And all I have to say is that, good God, they are freaking right. As I'm not kidding, for the very first 2 times I've played through the freaking first track of this game, I ended up in basically last place twice in a row just because of the freaking item balancing. Like the first time I was racing Yoshi going roughly in 3rd place, but then suddenly I get trampled by the freaking Mega Mushroom item, which allows the player to go extra large. And the second time, I choked up at the near end again just because of the freaking POW block, which is an item that causes everyone to spin out because of a shockwave. Items in Mario Kart Wii are freaking aggressive, as you'll be trampled multiple times in this game, where on one hand, you're about to catch up and get to the first place, but then, oh no, someone gave you the Thundercloud, which is basically the hot potato item. It can get so chaotic and BS instantly. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. Yeah, it is kind of frustrating to get stuff like cheap shots and such, but at the same time, it is BS in the most fun way possible. Personally, the most fun Mario Kart games are usually the ones that are just BS chaos. And Mario Kart Wii has that in spades sometimes, which is very fun in stuff like 4-player multiplayer. Which again, was the thing that Nintendo was really banking on in this game. So much so, is that they actually have 4 different kinds of controllers you can play with. Although for this video, my main go-to is probably with the Wii Remote and Nunchuck. I did have fun playing the game sideways with the Wii Wheel in mind, which I should mention for those who don't know already, it's just a piece of plastic, you don't really need the Wii Wheel to play. But honestly, I prefer the Nunchuck route, just because I have a lot more precisions using an analog stick than just wacky motion controls. This game does use the classic controller as well as the GameCube one, which on paper would sound like the best option. I mean, the GameCube controller is very good. But unfortunately, it's held back is that in order to do some tricks, which is very essential for this game, you're going to have to use the dinky D-pad to do so, which can be very awkward, especially since you're in a very fast-paced race, so you have to let go of the thumbstick for a sec just so you can press a button and then go back again. And for that reason is why I mostly prefer the Nunchuck controller, just because it just feels the most natural. But regardless on which controller you're going to be playing with, you're still going to be having a really good time. The new vehicles in this game may be a bit unbalanced, but even still, it's still very fun to go through. And I even like how the female characters get a bike suit every time they ride one. I think Peach, Daisy, and Rosalina look really good in those outfits. I think the only actual critique I do have with Mario Kart Wii in general is probably with its presentation. Visually speaking, Mario Kart Wii does look very good for a Nintendo Wii title. But I feel like it's only specifically the character models in this game that didn't really age the best. I mean, look at freaking Donkey Kong in this game. He looked like he got freaking lobotomized. But at the very least, the environments in this game does look pretty nice, even if it does feel a bit more washed out compared to GameCube. And you can really tell Nintendo's bloom fetish really kicked in this game. But I think the best part of the game's presentation is easily with the soundtrack, as Mario Kart Wii has a very stellar lineup of music, with one of the tracks containing probably one of the most iconic soundtracks in Mario Kart history. It's all really stellar stuff throughout. Okay, so this wouldn't be a Mario Kart video if I didn't mention all of the tracks in the game. Funniest thing, originally I was going to just go over the Nitro tracks in this game, but considering the fact that I literally did all 96 tracks in Mario Kart 8 as well as the 30 in Mario Kart World, I think it's fair enough to just go over all 32 tracks in this game. Starting with the Nitro tracks, and I must say, out of all the Mario Kart games out there, I think I can safely say Mario Kart Wii has one of the best lineup of Nitro tracks in this series. And it's honestly insane how good this lineup is, to the point where even the Mushroom Cup has some tracks that can be labeled as S tier for a lot of people. And all this begins with Luigi's Circuit, which is honestly the weakest track in the Nitro lineup. I can't really put fault to this track too much because it's the beginner track, so it's meant to be simple. Although, funniest thing, because of how simple this is, I feel like this is the one track where you're basically praying to God that the items doesn't screw you over. Other than the cool Luigi statue, there's really not that much to say about this one. Although I will say, if your weakest track in the game has to be the very first beginner track, then I'd say you're doing something very good. As after this, we head straight into Moo Moo Meadows, which is a spiritual sequel to Moo Moo Farms on Mario Kart 64. And honestly, out of all the tracks in this game, this is definitely the most feel-good one out of them all. As it's a really fun track to just vibe with as you pass by all these cute little Moo Moo cows. Which I must say, I always really adore because I just love those goofy smiles they have on their faces. But yeah, a pretty solid track, and after that, we head straight into Mushroom Gorge. Honestly, a really good track, and this is what I meant earlier when I said that even the Mushroom Cup courses has some very good S-tier tracks. Which is kind of crazy because the actual gimmick of this track is very straightforward as you're mostly bouncing on these bouncy mushrooms. Which is something that's very simple but very fun to go through. Especially at the near end of the cave where it's nothing but bouncing mushrooms. Where the left way is a bit faster but it's a bit trickier to go through, while the one on the right is a bit slower but it's easier to maneuver. And then after this, we head straight into another banger track with Toad's Factory. Which I gotta say is a really cool idea for a Mario Kart track as you're going through the factory that created all the item boxes you've seen throughout all the races. Where every 10 seconds, you're constantly going through different types of obstacles. One moment you're going through this hallway with this treadmill that allows you to go faster, with the only big obstacle is trying to avoid these crushers. And the next moment, you're outside in this little pier area as you try to avoid the treadmill as well as trying to get the item boxes. And then at the near end, as I have to maneuver through this mud that slows you down, and with the only way to do so is you with these dash pads. And that music! Ha! But as soon as we're done with the Mushroom Cup, we head straight forward to the Flower Cup with Mario Circuit. Again, just like with Luigi Circuit, there's really not that much to talk about with this one because it's just the traditional Mario Circuit. But despite that, I still give the edge for Mario Circuit compared to Luigi Circuit because even though it's just like the simple grass plane level, at the very least there's a bit more going on there as there's plenty of shortcuts you can do so, as well as this very nifty chain jump. But after this track, we then head forward to probably one of the most popular tracks in the Mario Kart series with Coconut Mall. And I must say, out of all the Mario Kart tropes out there, I always love the ones where you're racing through a regular location. And Coconut Mall does this excellently because it really does feel like you're going through a giant mall, as you just see so many different types of Miis just cheering you on in the background. And I even love how they use escalators as a big obstacle in this game, where if you choose the wrong one, it'll slow you down drastically, but if you choose the right one, you speed up. Anything's off with you at the parking lot trying to avoid getting hit by the Miis. Honestly, even though that this course has returned in multiple Mario Kart games after this, I still consider the original Wii version as the best version of Coconut Mall. As there was a certain spark that this version has that the other ones didn't really replicate too much. And I think it's most because of the fact that the actual mall itself feels very lively with so many different people in the background. But then after this, we head to another S-tier track in my opinion with DK Summit. Now, the best way to describe this track is that it's basically like DK Mountain from Double Dash and DK Pass from DS, and you put it in a blender. Where the main idea is that you're blasting yourself out of this barrel cannon on top of this snowy mountain. And so the whole race is basically you trying to go all the way down like you're on a snowboard. And along the way, this course also introduces one of the main things for Mario Kart Wii, which is these half pipes. Where if you drive through them, you'll go flying up in the air before going down, which is honestly one of the funnest things in this game. Like seriously though, back in the day, I constantly kept using the half pipe, as it's just very fun just to fling yourself in the air and come back down. But yeah, DK Summit is pretty good. And then finally wrap things up for the Flower Cup, we have Wario's Gold Mine. Now personally, I always had like a mixed history when it comes to this track, as back in the day, this was a track that I completely struggled a lot with, as there were just so many obstacles in the way, especially when you head to the actual mine areas, where these freaking minecarts will really knock you out. However, despite that, over the years, this track really grew on me a lot, especially when it got remade in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, where now instead of it being like that one track where I get frustrated on, now it's basically like that one Mario Kart Wii track that's honestly just like a roller coaster ride, especially at the beginning part, where you go all the way down like you're on a roller coaster. But anyway, so after the Flower Cup, we head forth to the Star Cup with Daisy Circuit. And out of all the circuit tracks in the Mario Kart series, this is definitely the most unique one of them all. As usually when it comes to the settings of circuit tracks, they're mostly just simple race courses. But that's not the case for Daisy Circuit, where instead you're racing through this cool resort town, with the main centerpiece being this cool statue of Daisy and Luigi dancing. Aw, that's nice. And I know I mentioned earlier how I kind of ragged on the game's graphics a bit, especially the character models, but despite that, I still think some of the courses themselves look pretty nice, and I think this is a good example. And as for a course like Koopa Cape, now this is another pretty good cult classic, where the main set piece this time is going through this cliffside right before going through this river. But the coolest set piece in this game is easily with this pipe section, where you go through this cool glass tube area. Where in there's this cool stream of water that allows you to go faster, but there's these electrical hazards in the tube, and if you get hit, you'll shrink down. Unfortunately, just like with Coconut Mall, this is one of those tracks that really peaked in the original game. As with later entries, they kind of toned stuff down, especially with the pipe area, where instead of it being like this cool aquarium section, it's now a generic underwater section. Although with that being said, the one Mario Kart Wii track where I can say it's always been consistent with later entries is easily with Maple Treeway. Which for one, I really gotta say, out of all the Mario Kart courses in this game, I think this one easily takes the case as being the prettiest looking one in this entire game, as I really love how this track nails the autumn aesthetic. As the whole thing around this one is that you're racing through this giant tree with a lot of cool obstacles that seem after fall, like when you head all the way to the top, you're trying to dodge these giant wigglers, and along the way you'll find these piles of leaves where sometimes they'll contain some certain items. And at the near end of this course, you're constantly hopping up and down on this cool little net area, which is very good for doing some tricks. And overall, it's just a really good course, and honestly, probably my top 5 in this game. And then finally wrapping up with the Star Cup, we have Grumble Volcano. This is the lava course for the game, and honestly it has a pretty cool gimmick with it. As since you're racing through an active volcano area, the whole entire course is completely unstable, and because of that, every lap it constantly keeps falling apart. And so by the end of lap 3, the entire course has become extremely narrow, so you need to avoid not falling into the lava. And then finally wrap things up, we head all the way to the Special Cup, starting with Dry Desert. Now usually with most Mario Kart tracks, they always have like that desert course, and every time they do so, it's usually one of the weakest tracks in the game. As 70% of the time when they have like a desert course, it's usually the most generic kind of desert course you could think of. Just sand, some pyramids in the background, and maybe a pokey here and there. I mean, hell, even the tiles for the courses are very generic. I didn't even say the right course because it's not Dry Desert, it's Dry Ruins. However, against all odds, somehow, this is actually a pretty cool desert track. As compared this to something like Desert Hills from DS or Dry Desert from GameCube, this one actually does something a bit more interesting, as you can actually go inside the pyramid, which has this very cool section where you're constantly using the half pipe so you can turn left and right. And then at the near end, there's this cool little area where every time you go through a lap, it constantly fills up more with sand. And so with lap 1, you can basically maneuver through the center of the area, but then as you go all the way to lap 3, you have to move around the center area because it's completely filled with sand. But yeah, overall, it's a pretty good desert track, and honestly, I wish they kind of brought this back instead of Desert Hills in Mario Kart World. And oh yeah, that Yoshi Sphinx is really cool. I like that. But anyway, so after that, we have Moonview Highway, which, honestly, this may be an unpopular opinion, this is actually my favorite course in this game, as I'm usually a big sucker for those nightly city themes, and a course like this has it in spades. If Moonview Meadows was basically a sequel to Moonview Farms, then I would say Moonview Highway is basically a sequel to Toad's Turnpike. Where in this one, it is a traffic course that is divided into 2 sections. Where the first area is fairly narrow, as you constantly need to do these windy turns while trying to avoid the oncoming traffic. While in the second area, you're going through this big beautiful city as you constantly need to get on these dash panels. And then finally, we head things off with a pre-ultimate course with Bowser's Castle. Which I've got to say, out of all the recent Bowser's courses out there, this is definitely one of my personal favorites. Where just like with Toad's Factory, it feels like every 10 seconds there's constantly a brand new obstacle you need to get through. Like one moment you're going through these weirdly haunted halls, and then the next moment, you need to dodge these giant fireballs from this giant mechanical Bowser. Which surprisingly has been a trope that's been in a lot of Mario Kart games, but honestly out of them all, I think this one had the best execution because I really love how it encourages you to use the half pipes to avoid it. And then finally ending things off with the Nitro courses, we have Rainbow Road. And man, out of all the Rainbow Roads out there, this is definitely one of the most iconic ones in the series. As I feel like this one specifically nails what a Rainbow Road should be like. It's not only just a beautiful looking course with a lot of influence with Mario Galaxy with all the star bits everywhere, but also it is pretty damn challenging. Like, this is probably the hardest Rainbow Road in the series since probably the original Super Nintendo, as there's so many different tight turns you need to go through, as well as the road being extremely narrow. And overall, just a perfect way to end things up with the Nitro lineup of Mario Kart Wii. And if you really couldn't tell by the based on how I describe all the courses, I really love the Nitro lineup in this game. It is honestly amazing how very good the consistency of quality of each of the courses has. With the only actual doubt I can think of is probably with Luigi Circuit, but at the same time, that is literally just the first beginner's track. And everything else is basically top-notch. There's a reason why a lot of these courses are so beloved. But we're not done yet, because we also have 16 more retro courses to go through. Now, even though like I had all my high prices with all the Nitro courses, I kind of feel like the retro courses this time around feel a bit more hit or miss. Not as egregious compared to Mario Kart DS, but it definitely feels a bit more of a mixed bag. Peach Beach is the very first retro course in the game, and honestly a pretty good one. It's basically the same course as in Mario Kart Double Dash. In fact, I'm 90% sure that all the GameCube courses in this game have been directly ported from the GameCube. With, of course, with the updated graphics, although I must say, I feel like if you took a side-by-side comparison of this and the original version, I feel like a course like this kind of emphasizes just how very washed out the colors are in Mario Kart Wii. It's still a nice looking course, but you can really tell the original Double Dash version definitely had better colors. And then after that, we have Yoshi's Fall. Now, I must say, out of all the retro courses, this is the one I embarrassingly played a lot back in the day. Yes, it's because of Yoshi. But honestly, after replaying it again after all these years, yeah, this course is kind of lame. Like, there's really not that much to talk about with this one, as all you basically do is just turn around in this very simple oval shape. I still think this is slightly better than Luigi's Circuit, mostly because at the very least, there is a bit of a hazard in some of the areas with these waterfalls. But other than that, it's basically just a generic starter course. Ghost Valley 2, I'm actually kind of surprised I ended up liking this a lot more than I remembered. The actual track layout is very simple because of how very wide the turns are, but what kind of draws me in with this course specifically is probably with its atmosphere. It honestly has like this kind of spooky ambience, with the soundtrack being very calm and quiet compared to the other Ghost tracks in the series. And also you can do this with the wall. And as for a track like Mario Raceway, it's a cute little course. Really not that much to say about it, doubly so for Sherbet Land. Although I must say, I'm a big sucker for the theme song for Sherbet Land, as I feel like it really nails the whimsical snowy aesthetic pretty well. And then there's Shy Guy Beach, which honestly is kind of terrible, as all you basically do is just drive around this square-shaped area, in a setting that honestly looks more fan-made than something Nintendo officially made because how very flat and cheap everything looks. Like, I get what they're trying to do, basically making like a 3D version of the original GBA course, but it just doesn't really look right. And then after that, we have Delfino Square, which was always a very pleasant Mario Kart DS course, where the whole thing is that you're basically driving through this Pianta town. And then after that, we have Waluigi Stadium, which honestly had a pretty good glow up in Mario Kart Wii. Like, this track was already a dirt bike stadium, so adding that to a game that's focusing on bikes, yeah, it's basically Imagine Heaven. Honestly, my favorite Waluigi themed course in the series. And then after that, we head to the final DS course, which is Desert Hills. I hate Desert Hills. Bowser's Castle 3 was already a pretty solid GBA track, as I was always a big sucker for like the colors of this area. And while the backgrounds do feel a bit flat, like with Shy Guy Beach, it definitely felt a lot more natural than that course. DK Sugar Parkway is pretty cool, doubly so for Mario Circuit. I honestly like how the trick system made some of the bumps in this area a lot more interesting to go through. But out of all the retro cups in this game, I think my personal favorite has to be with the Lightning Cup, as it starts off pretty well with Mario Circuit 3. Which, fun fact, has the world record for being the most recurring track in the Mario Kart series, as this course alone appeared in Super Mario Kart Super Circuit, Mario Kart Wii, Mario Kart Tour, Mario Kart 8, and now recently with Mario Kart World. And also another fun fact, even though the title itself is called Mario Circuit 3, this was actually the first ever course that Nintendo created in general, which probably explains why this course kept appearing in a lot of Mario Kart games. And as for Pete's Garden, this was always one of my personal favorite courses back in Mario Kart DS, as it was a really good track that basically has you going through this cool little garden area, with my favorite section of the game easily being this cool little maze area, where you constantly keep turning left and right while trying to avoid the giant chain jump, but they do contain items, so it's very encouraged for you to actually go near them. And then after that, we have DK Mountain. Now, this was always one of my personal favorite courses back in Double Dash, and it's basically identical in Mario Kart Wii. There is nothing more fun of launching yourself all the way up to this mountainside with this grumbly volcano, while you race all the way back down, and I really love the fact that you can actually see where you actually started, which really gives this course a really big scope. And then finally, we end things off with N64 Bowser's Castle. Now, this was always the most unique Bowser's Castle in the series, just because of, like, its tone and atmosphere. Usually when it comes to the Bowser Castle courses, they always have, like, this cool rock and metal feel to it. But then you have the N64 one, which feels a bit more unsettling than usual. As if this was a Bowser's Castle, but it's been completely abandoned over the years. With the only people left inside are just these thwomps. Including this one, which is locked behind these bars, which to this day, people kind of question what is this thwomp and its purpose. But even beyond that, the actual course layout itself is pretty fun to go through. There was a lot of pretty fun turns, a lot of great hazards to avoid. Honestly, I would be down if Nintendo actually brought back this version of Bowser's Castle, since it's been a while, and for some reason it never got remade in stuff like Mario Kart Tour. But yeah, that was all 32 tracks in Mario Kart Wii. I already mentioned how much I really love the Nitro tracks, and even if it was a bit more hit or miss, I still really enjoyed the retro lineup. But before we wrap things up, I think it's very appropriate to talk about this game's battle mode. Now, usually when it comes to the battle modes in Mario Kart games, they've been always very hit or miss, especially with the newer ones. Like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe had a fantastic battle mode, while Mario Kart World really didn't. And as for Mario Kart Wii, unfortunately, I feel like this is the only actual part of this game that really fell flat. It's not like Mario Kart 8 on Wii U bad, but it's more so leaning more towards like Mario Kart World Battle Mode. Which honestly sucks, because the actual battle mode maps themselves are pretty cool, and there's a very sizable amount of them. But what really killed battle mode for a lot of people is the lack of options. For one, they completely changed balloon battle, so instead of being a process of elimination, it's now you just going around until the timer ends. Think like Time Battle from Super Smash Bros. And not just that, but also they lock the entirety of battle mode into Team Battle. Meaning that even if you do like the best you could, you get as much points as possible, if your team doesn't pick up the pace, then you'll probably lose. But despite that, I don't know, it's still fun to run around knocking people off shells. I feel like Nintendo could have saved battle mode if they just gave us more options. But what we have now, I just find it just okay. I personally feel like what's actually saving battle mode for me personally is probably with the actual tracks. But even then, I don't feel like battle mode really dampened the Mario Kart Wii experience in the slightest, as this is still a really fantastic game and honestly holds up extremely well. Obviously, with future entries, they refine a lot of the aspects of Mario Kart's gameplay, but even still, just like with Mario Kart Double Dash, there's just a certain charm and feel that Mario Kart Wii has that the other games didn't really replicate too much just because they did their own things. The item balancing in this game is complete whack, but honestly it makes this game even more fun than ever. And of course, I cannot talk about Mario Kart Wii without mentioning the modding scene, because this game alone has an insane modding community. It's basically the Super Mario 64 equivalent to Mario Kart when it comes to the ROM hack scene. As there were just so many different characters people modded into the game, there were so many different tracks people made just for this game. And the craziest thing is that not only this game has an insane modding community, but also people basically turn this into like the Mario Kart equivalent to Super Smash Bros. Melee. As they basically turn all the janky aspects of this game into a competitive scene with so many insane shortcuts. It's honestly a lot to take in, and this single-handedly really helped the longevity of this game alone. The game was pretty fun back then, but honestly with the modding scene, it just makes this game even more hectic and very interesting to play through. I think I can safely say that Mario Kart Wii is definitely one of my top 3 favorite Mario Kart games of all time, period. But that'll do for today, so thank you for watching and I'll see you later. Bye-bye!